Tell me what you're eating.
I'm eating, for lunch, tomatoes, tuna fish, feta cheese, and olive oil.
Now, here's what's interesting about you. You eat that every day.
Every day.
Every day. Mm-hmm. You eat the same thing.
This is the man behind Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks, some of the most surreal, nightmarish films ever made. But his real life is the total opposite. Plain, simple, and almost boringly structured.
When there's some sort of order there, then you're free to mentally go off any place. You've got a safe sort of foundation and a place to spring off from.
Yeah.
That got me thinking, how does someone who lives with such order create worlds of chaos and strangeness?
The purer the environment, the more, fantastic the interior world can be, it seems to me.
Maybe the link between an artist's life and their art isn't as simple as we think. Maybe it's not the suffering, or the madness, or the drama we imagine artists need. Maybe it's something else entirely. I used to think you had to suffer to make great art, and a comfortable life would kill your creativity. This tortured artist image is seductive and romantic, and it makes for cinematic stories, and we all crave those dramas of a self-destructive genius. But what if it's not true? What if you don't need all that suffering to make art?
A lot of people say, well, suffering is good for art. Look at Van Gogh, they say. And I say, let's take a look at Van Gogh. Van Gogh didn't go out painting because he hated it, or he was suffering. The only time he was happy probably was when he was painting. He painted because he loved to paint. I like to think that Van Gogh would have been even more prolific and even greater if he wasn't so restricted by the things tormenting him. I don't think it was pain that made him so great. I think his painting brought him whatever happiness he had.
I told a student teacher of mine like that in Juilliard. She started talking about, the black people were despondent at night, and they say that's where the blues came from. Before I raised my hand, I said, listen, my father's rich, my mom is good looking, right? And I can play the blues. I never suffered and don't intend to suffer.
So if art doesn't need the raw suffering, pain, or chaos in life, then what is it that it needs? Short answer, a buffer.
A buffer?
Let me explain what I mean. Yes, the best art is the most personal, and you should create from what is deeply yours.
You are the raw material.
But always with some distance.
I felt the plays I was writing in London were just too close to home, and if you're writing something that's too based upon your own life or what's happening around you, the possibilities for story and where a story can go can be lost.
If you write directly about the wound or personal experience, you don't gain much.
You understand? There's no buffer zone.
It's not terribly constructive for a young woman who feels herself unattractive to tell a story about a woman who feels unattractive. And she can tell that story, but she's not going to learn much.
Many artists create with a kind of a buffer between them and their art, because it's in that space between the life you live and the story you tell where imagination does its work. Here's what my favorite actress Isabelle Huppert has to say about it.
Is there any role any of you've played that you felt has really changed your thinking about life?
No.
No? Are you serious? You've done like 60 films or more.
Never changed anything. No. I don't know, because life is here and doing roles is here. It's completely separate. Although it's completely in fusion, but yet it is separate. Yeah. So for me, acting is never about learning, or it's just about doing it, the present time. It's all about the pleasure of doing it.
It is a pleasure, is it?
Yeah. It's an immense pleasure, yeah. But then when it's over, you know. It doesn't pursue me, it doesn't follow me.
So you don't have to bleed on the page to make it powerful. Sometimes you just need enough space between yourself and the work. And it can show up in all kinds of ways, from literature, paintings, to music, even music as raw and direct as rap. Like, for example, when I first read War and Peace, I had no idea Tolstoy wasn't even alive during the events he wrote about. It all felt so vivid, like he saw it all firsthand. Then I found out he mixed some of his own soldiering years and family drama with the actual historical events and shaped it into something that was part real history, part his own life. And that distance is probably what made it what it is. Now, Tupac's story works kind of the same way, but it's a different kind of distance. I always thought he was the gangster from his songs. But then I stumbled on this clip of him as a teenager, and
Okay, my name is Tupac Shakur, and I attend Tamalpais High School, and I'm 17 years old. 18 will bring lots of responsibilities that I don't want, but it'll bring respect that I feel like that's the only way I can get it. You know, I try to be as mature as I can be. More kids are being handed crack than they're being handed diplomas. I mean, it shouldn't, I mean, like, okay, in school we're learning to analyze and then...
Well, what he rapped about wasn't exactly his everyday life. He grew up around art more than gangs. But that distance didn't make his work fake. He became a voice for streets he didn't exactly grow up on. Okay, we understand that you don't have to live through conflict to understand conflict. But what about people who went through heavy, traumatic experiences? Does it help their art or gets in the way? Like Salinger, who started writing The Catcher in the Rye while serving in World War II, or Kurt Vonnegut, who survived the Dresden bombing as a prisoner of war and turned that experience into Slaughterhouse-Five. Don't they kind of go against what we're saying? Well, glad you asked. Let's start with Salinger. Yes, he went through the war and he could have written about it, but what he chose to write about wasn't the battlefield itself. The Catcher in the Rye is about a teenager who hates the phoniness of the world and just wants to protect innocence. That story was his buffer. Instead of writing directly about the horrors he'd seen, he turned his experiences into something else, something distant enough that he could process it and make it meaningful. Okay, but what about Kurt Vonnegut? Sure, Slaughterhouse-Five draws on his experiences during the Dresden bombing, but he didn't write it right away. It came out more than 20 years later. And when he didn't just retell events. He mixed it in satire, time travel, and sci-fi. All those creative choices gave him the distance he needed to deal with the horror and render the trauma through humor.
I experimented with the science fiction idea, using it for relief, is to get some distance from an atrocity of this sort, to see how much it really matters in the long view. And the science fiction thing seemed to work, and it seemed to be amusing, and it seemed to lighten the whole enterprise, so I kept it in.
In other words, the story isn't a direct mirror of his suffering. Trauma can give you material, but what turns it into art is the space you give yourself. So you don't need suffering itself to create. You need the capacity to transform experience. Chaos in your life, pain, heartbreak, joy, all of it can become material, but it only becomes art when you step back and shape it with a bit of distance.